People talk. I'm gonna highlight this segment because people talk about how hard Hellfire Mortar is to get online for anybody but a Knoll. But look at my mummy doing it. I mean, come on. After not focusing any of those schools the entire game, you've got to go for it. Go for Hellfire Mortar. It is just the best thing you can do in this game. So I've been meaning to make this video for quite a long time because ever since patch 3.33, Hellfire Mortar has just been incredible for me. All the way through my streak on the Knoll, every time I got it, I made sure it was online. And it carried the game. It instantly, at the point that it came online, instantly changed the game from that point forward. The game was now a Hellfire Mortar game. Whatever I had been doing prior to that was basically meaningless. It didn't really matter. You could literally just take Hellfire Mortar from the point you get it online, which was sometimes as early as like layer 2, and just use that the rest of the game. And you would have been fine. And never was there a point, on the other hand, where you didn't want to be using Hellfire Mortar, where something else was better than Hellfire Mortar. And so, what I want to show you today, just really briefly, is how this spell isn't just for Gnolls, and it's not even for just for Ash and Zari worshippers. Yeah, it's probably a little bit easier to get online with Ash, no question. And I don't even know really if Noel gives it that much of an advantage, if it's even worth talking about. A bit, maybe. But instead of talking about that, where it's obvious, I want to talk to you about a streak of 3 non Noel characters where I got it online. And they were Mummy, Revenant, and Naga. And only one of those was an Ash worshipper. The other two were Dith and what, Gozag, I want to say? Yeah. So, like, they had no spell amplifying or any other effect like that that would make it easier. And so, I just want to show you first from the Mummy because I had a nice highlight here of what it takes to get Hellfire Mortar online. And it's like, yeah, I had some spell casting, but then I had 10, 10, and 7 in the relevant schools. Any character can get this online. On a mummy, for instance, you have -2 aptitudes in every one of the relevant schools, and it just doesn't matter. Eventually, actually pretty quickly if you get it early on, you can get this spell online. So let me talk through a relatively tricky situation here. We find ourselves in an ice cave, and this is very dangerous. Golden dragon, white ugly thing, very ugly thing, 3 caustic shriek, simulacra, and some other ice stuff. Now we go zag, potion petition, get lignification resistance, sort of a mixed bag there. Hellfire Mortar is currently at 14%. This is not a fight you want to take in general. Hellfire Mortar is the only reason that I stayed and fought this. Now, you could debate whether or not it was worth doing, but I wanted to show this because it's a bad situation. And Hellfire Mortar just carries us straight through it. So I get this out, and the first time I cast it's kind of in a bad position. You see it's pushing back 2 flying dudes who then butt up against each other and cancel out Hellfire Mortar. It can't push through 2 flying guys, so I recast it. Now, from this point forward, this thing is going to be shooting 2 piercing bolts of magma every turn. And obviously these guys are made of ice, so it's doing extra damage to them. But it doesn't matter. I mean, this thing carries all the way through extended if you want. So, point being, the efficiency, right? I cast that and then I just start doing other things. I'm worrying about getting them away from me. I'm thinking, okay, maybe I'll go invisible here. And then I remember, oh yeah, I have some scroll butterflies. So I push everything away from me. And Hellfire Mortar all along is just shooting, shooting, shooting. It's way off in the distance. It's hitting the guys that are north of me. I'm paying more attention now to the Golden Dragon who's below me. He hits for a ton of damage, and I really don't want to be in melee with him. So I'm not even thinking about the Shriek Simulacrum at this point. You know, I'm casting poison, and then I'm going to ignite poison just to help my mortar. Mortar's immune to that kind of damage. And it's just ticking along. It's killing the stuff that I'm not worried about, right? Now, most characters would be extremely worried about this. Without invisibility, butterflies, you're kind of in bad shape. Without Hellfire Mortar, you're not killing these enemies. Ignition is the only other thing that clears this area like this. So, long story short, we get out of this successfully. Hellfire Mortar does the lion's share of the work. I'm going to end up casting it one more time here, and it's going to easily evaporate these ice creatures. And I'll just remind you, that was all at 14%. So I have been casting this since the 20s, 20% failure rate. Because the downside of miscasting Hellfire Mortar is a bit of corrosion, a tiny bit of damage maybe, but these schools are not that scary to miscast. It's nothing like summoning. So it is well worth doing early on. Just a little later on, we're in Swamp. Hellfire Mortar is now at 14%. Before it was at 20, and then the Lignify changed my armor rating, and that's what got it lower before. So this is like 7% further along, more or less. Now it's down to 13 after that fight. So we're casting it, and it's carrying us. We're backing ourselves up with the Hoarfrost cannons, a little Ignite Poison here and there whenever we get a chance. Swamp is great for Ignite Poison. But Swamp is also really good for Hellfire Mortar. And as you can see, I'm leading with it. Every fight, Hellfire Mortar is coming out. It's getting efficient damage out there. It's cutting off the path of my enemies. There, I just miscast it. Who cares? Doesn't matter. A spell this powerful is well worth miscasting a few times. And again, it's not like a summoning where you get a miscast and an evil summon that comes and drains your mana and dispels the rest of your summons. It is nothing like that. So I'm just casting over and over, right on cooldown, over and over. So in summary, this is basically what you should be doing. Start casting it around 20, 25% fail rate, casting it on a cooldown, leading with it in fights. So let's talk tactics. This thing is a tactical masterpiece. Here in Zot, you always have this entryway with one tile where you can shoot your Hellfire Mortar through and block any kind of non-flying enemy. If it is flying, you push it back. Hellfire Mortar pushes back any single flying unit. Now, if you get two flying units adjacent to each other, pushing in the same direction, it does kill Hellfire Mortar. So you've got to be careful with that. It also works down here when you're trying to enter the lungs, which is a single space tile. Notably, it also covers up traps if there are traps there. And you can see me, I've blocked off the land-based units. The Orb of Fire flies over it. Now, I'm a summoning based build here, so I'm throwing lots of summons in front of the Orb of Fire. But alternatively, you can just shoot your Hellfire Mortar straight at it, which I'll be doing here in just a second. You can see that the Hellfire Mortar is shooting every turn, and half of its damage bypasses resistances and armor. And so that means that it can kill an Orb of Fire, despite the fact that the Orb of Fire is immune to fire damage. So I just keep summoning on a cooldown, and here you see the Orb of Fire gets in line with Hellfire Mortar, and Hellfire Mortar pushes it back. So this is a tactic you can use all game long to push back flying enemies or to block off land-based enemies. The second tactic is making shortcuts. So here I have flying, and we can just cut through walls. This is really good on the orb run in particular, but all game long, you can just walk straight through walls, following your mortar through. Now, you also use this to peek through walls, like when you get into a new region and you're surrounded by walls, but you know there are enemies close by. You can pop a hole in a wall with your Hellfire Mortar and see through there while also doing damage to those enemies. So this is a great way to attack your enemies when they can't attack you. I call this last tactic here the offensive retreat. So you get into a bad situation and it's time to pull back a little bit, or maybe you just want to reposition. You throw your Hellfire Mortar out toward the enemy and then run away from it. Now, yes, this is not the most efficient use of Hellfire Mortar because you are losing a few turns of it as soon as it goes out of your line of sight. But if you cast this and walk away, it's blocking the enemy's line of fire in some cases, it's pushing them back, it's blocking their movement if they're land based, and killing some of them so that by the time you decide that you're in a better position and ready to fight, there are fewer enemies to contend with. This is another reason why it's great on the orb run. When you have something really scary, especially a flying enemy, if you run in the opposite direction from it, it just pushes it back and you can escape. I do always say, run away on the orb run. You're not meant to be standing around fighting while more enemies are being summoned. Just get out. I mentioned this one earlier in brief, but you can cover up ground-based traps with your Hellfire Mortar. So here we are in Zot and covering up a Zot trap. Those are particularly scary. But you can also use this with displacing, alarm traps, any kind of trap in the game. You just cover it up with lava. Now it will reappear as soon as that lava disappears. So you got to keep a timer, mental timer on when that lava is going to disappear, when your trap's going to come back, because you may want to cover it up again before it does. Here we are again. We've got an alarm trap with enemies that are probably or possibly going to step on it. We're just not going to play around. We're going to cover it up. And at the same time, we're going to use our offensive retreat tactic, pushing the flying enemies away, doing some damage to them as we make our escape. So, what's the takeaway here? I think the main thing I want you to know is that you should be using this spell more often, and that you shouldn't listen to anybody telling you about how hard it is to get online or that it's somehow balanced by being 3 schools. This spell is stronger than level 9 spells, and it is actually relatively easy to get online because if you look at just getting somewhere between 7 and 10 training in each of the relevant schools and a bit of spell casting, this thing will be online. That is really, really cheap. Getting to level 10 in a spell school is a lot cheaper than getting to level 21 is from like level, what, 18, 17, something like that, which is what you'd need to get Shatter online or any of these other level 9 spells. And then you got to ask yourself, are those level 9 spells actually as good? Are they as efficient? Do they have as much utility? And I would say, on the whole, the answer to that is basically no. Yes, there's Polar Vortex, which is quite efficient. It bypasses resistances. You know, it has a little bit of utility with the flying and so on, but it does not work with summons, right? You will despawn all of your summons, which is huge given that summons are the best thing you can do in this game. And, you know, it requires a big open space. Like there's lots of little requirements to it. And its damage is good. Is it better than Hellfire Mortar? I don't know. It's kind of on par or pretty close. Maybe it's a little better. Like that's the only level 9 spell that I think even closely compares. You've got Firestorm, which I really dislike. It's 2 spell schools level 9, which means it's twice as expensive as Shatter and Polar Vortex. It's only as efficient as those little spiral flame things are good, and they're not that good. Like, yeah, it bypasses some damage when it first hits, and it does a bunch of damage, but really you're looking to cast this over and over and over until everything's dead. Whereas you could just cast one Hellfire Mortar and walk away. I don't know. Shatter may be another good comparison because it can open up walls, and that has a lot of utility throughout the game. It can help you escape, it can help you on orb runs. You know, it does all sorts of good things, but it has lots of downsides too, like not doing very good damage to flying enemies and so on. Also, not good with summons, right? None of these spells are that good with summons, which in my book really takes them all down a big notch. Because if you can have summons and do your main damage thing at the same time, whatever that might be, you're just better. You are a better character because of it. If your main damage thing means that you can't also have summons, which are extra bodies to distract enemies and take hits for you and all the rest that summons do, then you're weaker because of it, right? Every optimized character in some sense ought to have at least some kind of summon, at least some way to get other bodies on the screen because it helps you stay alive in so many ways. I think I could do a whole separate video on why summons are just the best thing to do in this game, but for now, just accept that they are, in my opinion. So this is why Hellfire Mortar, in my opinion, is the best spell in the game. I argue that it's actually not very hard to get online. It's always going to be easier with a god like Ash, obviously, or Vehemut, who makes your spells easier to cast if they are destruction-based spells. Um, and they're going to be easier with a species like Null, of course, because the skilling is just easier and distributed and all this. But it's not that different, right? I did it on Mummy, Naga, Revenant who have negative aptitudes in these skills, at least some of them. The Mummy in particular and Revenant both have really bad aptitudes. And they still come online just fine by the end of S branches, maybe before your third ruin, somewhere like that. And if you have Ash, it could be as early as layer 2. So, do you prioritize this spell over everything else? Sort of depends. You need to have an answer until you get the spell online, but that could be just about anything depending on when you find it. So, something like Hoarfrost Cannons is in the same spell schooling, and those will carry you right through S branches, by which time you get Hellfire Mortar online. The Fire and Earth schools both have spells at levels 5 and 6, say, that can carry you until you get Hellfire Mortar online. Forgecraft also. All these schools do have good spells. Forgecraft, for example, you can go Alistair's Walking Alembic, and that will carry you right into vaults, by which time you can get Hellfire Mortar online. So you just got to kind of make do with whatever else you find. But it's not like you have to neglect leveling into Hellfire Mortar as soon as possible. So you just pick the one of the 3 schools that is in Hellfire Mortar, and you pick the one that has spells that are going to carry you long enough to get Hellfire Mortar online. You focus those first. And then while you're using that, you're leveling up Mortar, and eventually you get it online. So long story short, play this more. Play it on more characters. Look for it. If you get it, it's going to change that game. All of a sudden, it will quickly become a Hellfire Mortar game. And Hellfire Mortar is realistically all you need to beat the game. I've shown it recently in the post game as well. So it is quite helpful throughout, no matter what stage of the game you're in. If you do focus this and prioritize it, as long as you don't die trying to get it online, which would obviously be foolish, then it's going to pay dividends. And it's going to pay dividends as soon as you get it on, because the earlier you get it on, the more overpowered it is, right? It stays overpowered the whole game, but obviously creatures in lair just don't have a chance when you've got a mortar online. You have more risk of dying due to hubris and being overconfident than literally anything else. So let me know what you think. Let me know if you've played with this quite a lot. I love the spell. I think you will too if you give it a fair shake.